Okay. Hello, welcome. This is, I think, going to be a very exciting discussion. In large part, I'm Mike Fabricant. It's the part I usually skip, but I'll mention it in any event. It's going to be a very exciting discussion, I think, about the conjunction of laying off, not reappointing large numbers of part-time faculty, and the question of class size and quality of education. And we know that the ratios in the classroom are rising. We know there's been a continuing disinvestment in the university. And we also know that the university had choices. Choices, I think, in my estimation at least, it failed to actualize. Choices about the CARES money, 30 million out of 120 million, which would have, in fact, meant that no part-time faculty person would have been laid off if that investment had been made. This is about, in part, that is the PSC's impact bargaining. We are bargaining and negotiating, or struggling to bargain with management about class size. Historically, that's been off the table. What differentiates this moment from past moments regarding class size is the fact that the increases in class size very much impact the workload of faculty, and that is the case that is going to be made, and that is a case that we will make going forward. But presently, we have a wonderful group of panelists, and a co-host, Blanca Vasquez, will have something to say in introducing herself and this panel. And then I would ask Lorraine, who is a Vice President of Community Colleges for PSC, David Hatchett, who is an EC member, and from Edgar Evers, LaGuardia, for Lorraine, and Michael Paris, who is a department chair at Staten Island, to introduce themselves a little bit, and then we'll move on to the panel itself. Blanca.
All right. I think a lot of people may know me. I've been around for a while. I'm in the executive council. I actually just retired from teaching, right, at Hunter, where I've been an adjunct for the last 16 years, 17 years now going, in film and media studies. I was also a long-time HEO at the Center for Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter, so I'm well aware of HEO issues also in general, and in this crisis period. I'm also a graduate of tuition-free CUNY, so I know what CUNY could be and should be for our students. So I'll come back to a lot of these issues. I am a member of the Executive Council. I'm a member of the bargaining team. So I've had to deal frontline with how CUNY is responding to this crisis, or my disappointment in how CUNY is responding to this crisis. But, we'll come back to that as we go through introductions.
Lorraine.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Cohen. I've taught in CUNY for 25 years. I have been not only a faculty member, but I've also been an academic chair for 3 years. So I think I will understand the issue from many points of view. And I've been on the Executive Council for 9 years, 6 years as vice president. So my campus, LaGuardia, the issue of class size has always been an enormous issue, even before the pandemic. And as vice president of community colleges, I'm in touch with community college chairs all over the university, and it is an issue of extreme importance, not only because of the workload, which we're going to talk about, but also because of the impact of class size on teaching and on our students. Before the virus and the need for all of us to go online in the spring, class size for online courses was limited to 22. That suggests that there was indeed a recognition that small class size was necessary in doing online teaching. It was necessary because faculty were teaching pedagogically in a different way, but also because there is much more writing and much more grading on the online form of teaching. The students are the way they communicate and respond to issues is very much in terms of their written work. The question is, as the administrations all over CUNY are raising class size, raising it from 22 to 38. I think David's story will tell us even larger raises of class size. What does this reflect? It reflects a belief that somehow our students' education is not critical. The issue is being driven by cost rather than what is a quality education for CUNY students. And as faculty and as a union, we care about the kind of education that our students receive. All the research, in addition to our own experience, demonstrates that class size matters. The research that I have used and referred to, it says that, one, online teaching requires more labor by faculty. It is more work, not less work, than in-person classes. And number two, that when students report on what gives them satisfaction about education, it's always the amount of interaction between students and faculty. That is a critical component, and it is even more important for our students, many of whom have not had the kind of attention that they need in their public school. They come from educationally disadvantaged backgrounds, and they need and require not just the intellectual support of teachers, but the emotional support of teachers, which means really one-on-one interaction. Furthermore, it is our students that we all hear about, the students from Black and Brown communities who have been worst hit by the pandemic. They have experienced in their own lives illness, death on the part of relatives, loss of jobs. They live in crowded apartments where there may be one computer for several different people, children in the apartment, who are also needing use of the computer. They are under a great deal of stress, and the classroom can become a community to give them support. There has to be a recognition that creating a classroom, especially at this time, means creating a community that is both socially supportive as well as intellectually supportive. That requires smaller classes. And finally, in my college, and I think throughout the university, there's been a tremendous emphasis not only on teaching students the course material that reflects the discipline that they are teaching in. It's not only that. There's been a tremendous emphasis on skills development, critical thinking, analytic writing, comprehensive reading. All of this requires faculty to engage very carefully on a one-to-one basis. Finally, the workload is overwhelming. Even with smaller classes, the amount of grading, the amount of preparation, experimenting with different pedagogies, all of this requires intense labor by faculty. Without smaller classes, what we have is a situation of super exploitation as well as inferior education for our students, and that cannot be allowed. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Wonderful overview of the many benefits of small classes or smaller classes and quality of education, and the many costs associated with increasing class size. You answered the question, I believe, that was posted by Mr. Horowitz, raising the question about how students are impacted as a result of the increased class size. So thank you very, very much. David, we move on to you to talk specifically or more generally, but specifically about the circumstance at Medgar Evers. And we know that that's an especially vexed situation. David.
Yeah, hello, everyone. I hope you're having a good day. My name is David Hatchett. I'm a 30-year veteran of the classroom at Medgar Evers College. I was an adjunct for 22 years. And I sit on the PSC Executive Council. I sit on the bargaining team. And I also coordinate the adjunct organizer project, the liaison project. Fast forward. I sit on the executive council at Medgar Evers as well. Now, for people who don't know, be clear about this. Medgar Evers is one of the centers for African American life and culture in New York City. It sits at the heart of the largest continuous Black community in the country. The 5 neighborhoods, East New York, Bed-Stuy, Flatbush, they're all joined together. You flow from one to the other. And Medgar Evers is one of the key institutions in that area. Medgar Evers traditionally has specialized in taking students who were not so great high school students and preparing them for college and the larger work world. Fast forward again. The labor management meeting at the labor management team at my college went to see the president and the provost in July, and they told us they were increasing class size to 43. That's literally a class and a half. Before the class size max was 28, now it went to 43. Already we're serving students who, many of them are from immigrant backgrounds, many of them are ESL. And they only survive by their ability to interact personally with their teachers, with their instructors, and their classmates, which becomes extraordinarily difficult in a situation where the class is now a class and a half. The administration has fought tooth and nail on this. We asked them initially whether they would whether they would drop to 43. The next week, they informed us they'd increase the class size to 53. Then we went back and argued again, and they said, okay, we'll knock it back down to 43. Now, be clear now. I think we're facing a kind of an interesting paradigm here, because if you think about it, the social service networks in the cities have been drastically underfunded for the past generation. Now here, in the midst of the COVID crisis, we're getting even greater underfunding. Medgar Evers is $4 million in debt. And Medgar Evers not only responds to this by increasing class sizes to 43, it fires a third of its adjuncts, including its most disproportionately hitting its most experienced adjuncts. To me, this represents a new model and a new danger for CUNY. If it can happen at Medgar Evers, it can happen anywhere. When minority problems are not addressed and they're not focused on, they explode across the society and produce all sorts of things. They produced the Civil War. They produced the 1960s, which was almost another Civil War. Once again, we're faced with another dilemma where a major educational institution in the African American community is being completely undermined. And perhaps that could be used as a model which could be replicated all throughout CUNY. So this is not only a crisis for African Americans, it's not only a crisis for the Brooklyn African American community, it's a crisis for the whole of CUNY. So we have to approach it that way and understand that the situation has to be stopped here. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We have another question. The question is, why hasn't, I'm going to read it. Why has the union not systematically collected data about class sizes increasing over recent weeks? When will the union collect this data and publicize it so we have something other than anecdotes? It's a good question. I think we have been struggling to collect that data. Chapter chairs have come back with their understanding of increases on their campuses. We, again, this is all happening very quickly, much influx as a result of the different hits that different campuses are taking. as a result of loss of students, floating certain sections, eliminating other sections, much fluidity. But the chapter chairs have come in with some figures. We're still waiting on finalization of some of those figures. We know there's variability on campuses, enormous variability between type of classes that are being mounted. Some classes, for example, basic comprehension and reading or math. In community college, different kind of issues in terms of increase than for other classes, say in the sciences. So we are working on that. We are also not in a position necessarily, other than through chairs and our members, to get a precise number. We rely on CUNY. CUNY has devolved that responsibility to campuses, taking very little responsibility. And so we have chapter chairs pressing their presidents in order to generate the most precise numbers we can get. It is still in process for the reasons I've already suggested. Thank you for the question. So we've had two presentations. And Michael Paris, college. Well, actually, David, did you want to do a little bit more introduction of yourself?
I don't know how much more I could do, Mike. I mean,
right. Okay, that's all good.
I thought I went on too long with that.
No, never, David. You never go too long. Michael, you want to introduce yourself, and then Michael's in the position of responding to the presentations and sort of raising perhaps questions or simply commentary or commentary in relationship to what has been said. Michael.
Sure, I'll try to be brief. I guess this is the role of discussant. I've been teaching full-time at various institutions since 1995. I've been full-time at CUNY since 2001. I've taught at City College. I taught for a year at John Jay. I've been at the College of Staten Island since 2007. When I arrived at CSI in 2007, I was one of 40 new faculty members coming on board that year. Over the last several years, we've brought in 2 to 3 a year at most. Our funding has been flat for many years before COVID, and COVID only makes things radically worse. We've had this structural deficit. We've been making cuts every year, fewer full-time faculty teaching, more adjuncts teaching, bigger class sizes, infrastructure maintenance questions going unaddressed. It was a bad situation before the crisis. The situation is chaotic, and it's really just very hard to get a handle on things. We were asked to cut our adjuncts by 30% in May. We chairs, especially in humanities and social sciences, pushed back. We had a moment where we simply said, no, you do it. We're not going to do it. It could be done, but you'll have to do it. We won't do it. And then the union fought very well to extend these deadlines, to buy some time. And then it was a process of negotiating. We did make some concessions. We did what we normally do, which is adjust our part-time staff according to enrollments and budgets as we go through the summer. We did some compromising overall, I would say. But we also warned them that they weren't going to have sections for the students. We're just adding new sections today. We're out of seats for our onboarding freshmen. So we're putting on new sections, and I am scrambling to retain people that they made me non-reappoint back in May, today. And I think what I want to raise is I don't think this has come up as sharply as it needs to come up. But one of the things that struck me as a chair of a department sitting in on all the personnel and budget committee meetings at the College of Staten Island is just how little democracy we have at home in our institutions. We don't have shared governance. They control the information. They tell you, our president was wonderful about convening us to tell us what his thought process was, which was basically preemptive budget cuts targeted to people he was able to hit, people who were vulnerable, part-time faculty, college assistants, HEOs. Well, that was what he called the discretionary part of the budget. So that's where he would hit before we actually had any budget numbers to go on, right? And we didn't have any input. We kept telling him we need a body that's representative. The students need to be at the table. Part-time faculty need to be at the table. You get better decisions when you take different points of view into account. And I know our union's been fighting to get information, but why is it so hard? Why is it so difficult to have transparency and input from different constituencies at a public institution? Because the institution's broken in terms of shared governance, and we really need to fix that. That's one thing that comes to mind most strongly. Our part-time faculty who are left are being exploited. Everything takes longer. They did an enormous amount of unpaid labor in the spring, getting their courses online. They're doing an enormous amount of unpaid labor now, setting up online courses and teaching online. They're getting a pay cut. For incoming students, for us, a typical class size is 45. They didn't reduce any caps. Right? Most of my part-timers are teaching 2 sections with 45 students each. I'm teaching 2 sections with 35 students each this semester, and I've never taught online before. We're doing the best we can. Why? Because we stand against the degradation of our students' learning environment. I've lifted that line from a recent editorial by Michael Fabricant that, you know, that's what's going on. People of color, poor people are getting hit again. They're already exploited. They're already left out. And this is what we're fighting against. And it's across public institutions. The post office is only the most recent example of an institution where people of color work disproportionately, and needy, poor, dependent people rely on that institution. So it's under attack. And, you know, I am hopeful that over time, this is a democratic moment for us. I've never been active in the union, terribly active in the union. I've been active in other places, but there are many, many more people who are fighting back and talking and getting to know each other. And I'm optimistic if we take a 2-year time frame here, but we have to make the government respond. And the last thing I'll mention is just Albany. Like, the Democrats control all 3 institutions, but the governor won't raise taxes on his wealthy friends. It's as simple as that. So we have to keep pushing on that. So thank you all, and I'm really glad to be able to join you.
Thank you, Michael, and very thoughtful additions to this conversation that sort of extracted from some of the themes. David has given us a really powerful presentation, I think, of some of what is going on in Megger. As Lorraine has pointed out, a kind of general sense of the costs and the benefit, the costs of larger classes and the benefits of smaller classes. And we know we have a very particular struggle within CUNY that each speaker has pointed out. Blanca now has some points that she would like to make regarding leadership at the university and specifically the chancellorate. Blanca.
I'm going to say this with heavy heart, fellow. We're fighting for CUNY. The union is fighting for CUNY. Students are fighting for CUNY. Students also fighting to survive. So I was at a CUNY Rising meeting yesterday where a student wrote in. I was really moved by this, that schoolwork was difficult for her. And she said, but I honestly attribute my semester success to all the professors and support staff and advisors and tutors who held my hand, prodded me along, and supported me in the way I needed to succeed, because the crazy, the fears, and the unknown, despite the crazies, the fears, and the unknowns, Kingsborough Community College faculty really outdid themselves. And this is true, right? This is true across the university, you know, that everyone extended themselves at every level of the university. I mean, it's been extraordinary while having to take care of our own children and families and, you know, and loved ones and neighbors. So I'm disappointed, you know, because I'm not hearing Felix Matos Rodriguez, and I'm not hearing the Board of Trustees fight for CUNY. I'm not hearing them advocate, you know, for more. I'm hearing them accept austerity. I'm hearing them, I think the worst thing I hear them doing is this exact thing, class size, right? Because if we care about students, class size is going to be the main reason we lose students, you know, in this coming, right, this coming year. The chancellor and the Board of Trustees, they have to consider, you know, the racial impact of their decisions, right, on our student body. You know, they have to, on communities of color, on immigrant students, on the communities that have suffered the worst under COVID. You know, so my challenge is really to the chancellor. You know, we expected so much of you because you were from CUNY, because you knew the community colleges, because you knew the senior colleges. We haven't had a chancellor like that in forever, right? You know, they've been jettisoned in from outside with no real commitment, you know, to the community here in New York. So I think you have to step up. fellow. I think the Board of Trustees, do we have Board of Trustees that are members of the Black and Latino communities, right? That come out of, Black organizations or Puerto Rican organizations who know who we are, who know what the grassroots issues are. So I'm going to ask, what is your vision for CUNY Board of Trustees? Is CUNY going to become smaller? Is it going to become wider, right? Where more middle-class students are going to pay higher tuition? Are we going to lose Medgar Evers? Can you allow that to happen? We had to fight for Hostos and Medgar Evers back in the 70s retention. I was here. I was a part of that. Where like the whole Bronx turned out to save Hostos. So do we need to turn out the whole Black community in Brooklyn or in the city to save Medgar Evers? So where's the chancellor? Where are the Board of Trustees? Where's that leadership, to make sure that our students survive? What's your vision for CUNY? We have a Green New Deal. We're ready to go. We know what we need, right? So where's our leadership?
Thank you, Blanca, for your incisive and passionate question about leadership. Unfortunately, as we all know, the chancellor's not here to respond. But I wanted to at least elaborate, or name some points consistent with the point that you're raising, and then raise a question for the panel. We know that the national standard for online learning and quality education is the ratio is 1 faculty member to 12 students. And we know that's often exceeded. And we hear each of our panelists talking about an ever higher ceiling. Medgar probably at this point the highest ceiling. Michael talks about 35, 45 students online. Lorraine talks about a kind of ceiling that is also increasing. And that question, it seems to me, is related to 3,000 part-time faculty who were laid off. Those ratios are rising as a result of layoffs. And we know that $30 million out of 120 from the federal government's there. 8 Congress people, by the way, just signed a letter, and there was a press release today pressing the university to spend that money to rehire part-time faculty. Phalo says essentially, or our chancellor, that my business, my mission is to serve students. We're going to take this money and provide the supports they need, not to hire. And I'm not, this is not exact, but it's exact enough, not to hire PhDs. Well, decoupling the question of quality from class size, which is the consequence really of these ratios, in an instance in which the chancellor has 100% control over that outcome based upon the choices he makes regarding its allocation. That to me it sort of harmonizes with what Blanca has just pointed out. So having said all that, let me ask you, based upon your travels and your colleges, for some of you across the university, what kind of appetite do faculty have for raising and pressing the question of class size with the chancellery in this particular moment? Do they see it as an issue but not a priority issue? Do they see it as an urgent issue? And who do they see as responsible? If panelists want to respond to that question.
I can respond. I think that I just came from a chapter meeting today, and the faculty was as one voice that the class sizes were completely unacceptable and the firings were completely unacceptable. Earlier in the semester, we had a chairs meeting, and the chairs worked early in the semester. Earlier in the summer, we had a chairs meeting, and the chairs as one spoke that they were absolutely appalled by the fact that they had to let go of many of their most experienced faculty. I've never seen people so angry as I saw them today. I've never seen the meeting almost turned into pandemonium. So that's a clear example in my mind of something that has been building for a while, and people have been sending emails, they've been reaching out to the union in needs of action, and they want the union to step forward and defend it. And everybody knows what's at stake.
Michael, Lorraine, Michael.
The appetite for lowering class sizes is very large. However, I would say that for now, the focus is more on college administrations rather than on the chancellor. Well, again, my understanding is that the chairs are supportive of lower class sizes. Even the provost may be supportive, but they're all singing the same tune, which is that there is no money and therefore their hands are tied. And so that automatically lifts the question, elevates it to looking at the chancellor. And it seems to me that if we begin to organize on a university-wide level about class size, there would be a lot of support. One of the issues, as you alluded to, is that we don't know. I mean, in some departments, class size may be lower. You know, to some degree, this is not uniform. So that may impact faculty's response. But I think, generally speaking, workload is a fundamental issue, and class size is connected strongly to workload.
Michael?
Yeah, I think that this is really difficult. You know, I mean, it's not like this crisis isn't nationwide. It is. It's going on at Rutgers. They're in a battle there, big battle at Rutgers over this, and it's reached faculty members at private schools. It's going on everywhere. But I think that the urgency among the faculty will increase after we experience trying to teach full classes online across the board with high numbers. I think that experience will add some urgency. I think the will is there, but if I could just be a little flippant about it, how do you shut down a campus if you're not on it? And we don't want to hurt our students. You know, we all, to the last one, my part-time faculty, and there are many of them, go the extra mile without giving it thought. You know, I have to remind them that they're getting a pay cut and they should watch their over tallies and their workload, right? I mean, we don't want to hurt our students. So it's a very difficult question, but I think the pressure is I don't think we're there yet, but you know, this is untenable. And the issue is, where is the power and where is the money? At other places, it's pretty clear that there's money. Here, it's a little bit opaque to most people, and most people have bought the story that's different than the one, Michael, that you told about, you know, other choices are possible and there is money. So maybe we need to do a better job of saying that, you know, they're making choices about who to disadvantage and where to put resources that they in fact have, as opposed to having their hands tied. On the campus, my campus, the sense is that our president's, you know, inept, but a good guy, and his hands are tied. And I, you know, honestly, I'm not exactly sure who the decision maker up the line, where the buck actually stops. So even I'm sort of in the dark about that.
Thank you, Michael. Blanca, did you want to add to any of this?
I did want to add the problem of data and the problem of knowing what's happening at every campus, because up until now, right, CUNY has been centralizing everything. It's been centralizing admissions. It's been centralizing, right, all the processes, right, taking like actually even decisions away from the colleges. All of a sudden, in the middle of this crisis, right, it's the opposite direction. It's like every school does whatever every school wants to do. It means that we have to, it means that the data doesn't come in centrally. It's got to flow in from each different school or department. I mean, it makes it difficult to see the whole picture, you know, but I think it's a strategy, you know, of us not knowing, you know, very quickly what's going on. I think CUNY must know, but they're not releasing data. They also are misleading us in that, so at the end of the spring, they non-reappointed a certain number of adjuncts, right? And then we get a week before classes start, adjuncts getting non-reappointment letters, you know, like a week before classes start, you know, or losing enough classes so that they lose healthcare, like a lot of last minute decisions that are not, you know, tied to enrollment, right? They are tied to the doubling and tripling of class sizes. The one thing I want CUNY to tell us is what's happening to students. What are the dropout rates? I want to see them in different colleges. I want to see them in different programs. Who's being hurt? Who's being impacted? Right. So we're having a real problem with CUNY, with the flow of information from CUNY. And I say that as a member of the bargaining team, that we get answers from questions we raised 2 months ago, and there was no reason for that. So that's part of the problem, and I think students are, of course, a really powerful force in resisting this, but there's a communication problem here, also. But CUNY has to look at what it's doing to students. CUNY has to report, dropout rates, right? We need to know.
Right. I'm still waiting for questions from folks who are watching. And so until, we have a question. Comments from Roberta Kilkenny. The excessively large class size is also a function of the university's lack of adequate planning. When the decision was made to go primarily remote from the fall, F2F classes were made remote irrespective of the caps previously set for them as F2F classes. And that's accurate and very precise statement about circumstance for those classes. And I think generalizable to other classes and kinds of classes across the university. So thank you, Roberta. I'll wait for other questions to come in and I'll pose another until they do. So part of what I'm hearing, let's assume for the moment, going back to Michael's point, that the $30 million, the university has a good deal of control over this given the CARES Act money and the $30 million. Let's make that assumption, at least for those 3,000 part-time faculty to reappoint them. And having said that, we now have students and faculty in the same circumstance, right? I mean, they've always been, but now they're in a particularly oppressed space in which class size is rising, learning is virtual, class sizes should be far less than they are face-to-face, and yet they're rising beyond much of what we've experienced in the classroom. Is there a basis of thinking about that circumstance in working faculty and students working together around the question of class size in this moment? Do you hear anyone talking about that? Is that something you imagine might happen? Because it does seem to me more now than ever, learning conditions and working conditions are inextricably linked in this space and in this moment. So I want to just put that out to you, David, Lorraine, Michael, if you'd be, have a response to that.
This is such a difficult period to organize in, and there are wonderful student activists in CUNY Rising and in other units of the university, but as well as faculty having to be organized, students also need organizing. And I do think students would be on the same side as faculty and would organize, but there are two other issues. One, as you said in the beginning, class size has normally not been a subject of bargaining. Under these extraordinary conditions, we're saying it must be a subject of bargaining. But one of the institutions that should be addressing this are the governance bodies. And they're supposed to be involved with curricula, class size. What's going to happen if somebody gets the bright idea that we should change the nature of the university to be an online university? And who's going to stand up and who's going to stop them? And one of the bodies that needs to stop them is governance. And I want to also speak just briefly to the earlier question. I think the person that is singularly responsible is Governor Cuomo.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think there's been a lack of courage and integrity on the part of the chancellor and the board of trustees in being strong public advocates in making a case publicly for why CUNY is an essential institution for the city and the state.
Right.
But Governor Cuomo is rolling the dice that the feds hopefully will come in, and I hope the feds come in too. But there are solutions to this, and that has to do with income, with where money is coming from. And he is refusing to make a choice that he could make, which is raising taxes on the super wealthy. There are a bunch of ideas out there that have been spelled out. And in effect, when we think about the consequences of his action, he is destroying the opportunities of our students. He is destroying the future lives of our students. And we have to hold him accountable. He may have been good on COVID, I give him credit, but he has been terrible on investment in CUNY in particular.
Oh, we can't hear you. What happened?
Yeah, can I respond?
Okay.
I think that it's funny. I'm an avid biker, particularly so now that there's a lot of traffic, not a lot of traffic on the streets. And I was riding my bike in June in Manhattan, and I ran into the middle of one of the No Justice, No Peace demonstrations. And this demonstration was one of those amazing things you've ever seen. It went 10 blocks long, 10, 15 blocks long, 10 people crossed the street. So I sat and watched the whole group, and they all looked like my students. They were, I almost wanted to reach out and touch them. They were like people that I have in my classes every day. They were out arguing against police brutality and in some ways economic inequality. But it's in some ways, there are a lot of different groups in the city fighting around particular issues, but nothing ever brings them all together to fight around one issue. And they're all interconnected. Police brutality, economic inequality, class sizes, lack of funding for CUNY, it's all the same battle. And in some ways, there are a lot of like pieces of things out here and there that somebody has to pick up and weld together into a weapon to make some change. So the raw materials are there. The consciousness is there. It's just a question of who's going to pick up those pieces and put them together.
Michael.
Yeah, I think, do you go by Mike or Michael?
Mike is usual.
Mike's usual. Mike, your comment makes me think that, I'm someone who takes kind of a liberal approach with my students, and I try not to be too heavy-handed. And I could see it the other way. You could be highly political as long as you give them the resources to fight with you, as in terms of pedagogy. But I think what you said makes me think we need to engage with our students much more directly and politically around this. So I'm wondering, I'm thinking of composing a note to my students and sharing it with my entire faculty at CSI for their thoughts, and say, I don't really want to be in this Zoom call with you with 35 of you. And in fact, I'm doing it mostly asynchronously, but I will meet them once a week. You're being mistreated. Someone is treating you really badly, and they're treating me badly, but that means you're being treated badly. And this should be a room with 15 students. But if people don't allocate resources, it means they don't care about you. That's why this class size is 35 or 40, 45, right out of the gate. Some statement that we could all make with our students and say, whatever our differences, we can agree that this is the common good here that we're talking about. It's an investment in the future. So I'm going to do that. And I would not, half hour ago, that didn't occur to me. It was your question that made me think that we need to do it that way for now. Just why should I shouldn't put up with this. I'm putting up with this more than I should. I was a chair. You're an administrative cog, right? And you're trying to negotiate. I've been putting up with it too much. And they should be told my opinion that they shouldn't put up with it. They don't have to agree. But
well, that's a powerful statement, Michael. And that's fundamentally, I think, the question really is, have we reached the threshold point of a much more common fate in the space and place with our students as we're less and less able to deliver the kind of education as faculty that has brought us to this university. And however much we may struggle, the slippery slope is before us. And yet we know that the power that we need is going to have to involve faculty and students. And how we use ourselves, of course, with greater power is a serious question for us. But at the same time, an equally serious question is, how do we bring our sense of mission regarding the university into the classroom, given the conditions that exist that are ever more degraded for students and for us? That's really the question. So thought I'd raise it. It's one I'm going to keep raising. I think it's a real place where we can situate ourselves with students in a powerful way. And I come back to a point a couple of you made. This is only going to get worse. These numbers are likely to rise. The learning conditions are not going to get better in the short run, right? We're looking at a 1 or 2 or 3 year period in which we're going to be struggling for resources. And the question really is how we preserve the quality of learning over the next 2 to 3 years while we're trying to make these transitions to the kind of revenue we need. Any questions that members of the panel have that remain unanswered that come up for you in the course of this conversation?
I do want to say that we are at this very different and pivotal moment. Those classroom conditions are also students' living conditions, right? So we're going to see an eviction crisis coming, very soon. Our students' families are going to be in that crisis, very soon. All of these things are interconnected because that makes it much more difficult for students to be in classrooms, right? So that's one of the discussions with students is, how do we make it, how do we help you succeed? What do you need? It's like, and I have to say that just this couple of days ago, whatever, the Brooklyn College faculty put out a Dream CUNY module. It's wonderful. It's this little teaching module. And part of it is like, what should CUNY look like, right? We should be talking about vision. We should be talking about not how messed up everything is, but how this is an opportunity to rewrite the books. I mean, I think that's the real challenge. Black Lives Matter on the street, David, were people who are environmentalists, people who are in the gay and lesbian, transgender rights movement, people who are in every actual health advocates, right? In every actual social issue. Black Lives Matter is bringing together not just policing, but all the social issues are coming to a head because it's kind of do or die. We're in a do or die situation. The environmental movement is a do or die. The planet dies. Students understand that. I mean, I just say that the potential for actually linking struggles is also really there, that this is also opportunity, as well as crisis, right? Yeah. So I think it's a natural also connections, right, to what people are suffering and struggling against.
Right. I mean, I certainly would agree with that, but I would also add some part of that we have to create, but some of it comes to us, not something we can invent. Right. Where we live and where we work and the circumstance within the classes is come to us. And it's a place where we can begin to try to impose our thinking and our will with students and faculty. We have a question from Veronica at Brooklyn College.
Good question.
And this is the question, can we come up with class size parameters for online teaching and organize chairs on campuses to endorse these parameters? I like Michael's idea of asking students to become active in this struggle. So as a chair, Michael, I ask you to, and I know Lorraine has been a chair too, I'd ask the two of you maybe to take the lead on that question, and I would point out, can chairs do it as distinguished from, if chairs can do it, what's the kind of leverage they have to impose upon administration they're doing it?
I don't think we have a great deal of power at the moment to say, go to a dean and say, well, these classes have to be 25 or less. It's the other direction. The pressure is all the other way. There is some room for negotiation, but I just don't think that most of us full-time faculty are just, we're a bit traumatized. We're not really thinking clearly about what these class sizes mean for online learning. It doesn't work with 45 students, and yet that was the cap. That was too much for in-person. But I think it's maybe some education about this, and that would create more pressure to make some clearer demands. the Forbes article that was cited in the piece says 12, and you mentioned that. Well, 25 at 25 would be very nice, actually, for intro level classes, and maybe 18 for higher level classes. But I'm going to pursue this. I'll share with you all, but I'm going to be broadcasting this over the next couple of days to all the chairs at CSI and see what happens.
That's great, Michael. And yes, please share it. Lorraine, did you want to add?
Just that as a chair, it is possible to certainly organize chairs, at least to take a position on the issue. I think, the PSC has had a technology committee with people that know a lot about distance learning. I do think it's possible to set standards and to argue for that and organize around that in the university as a whole. And I think getting chairs on board is a very good idea, and we should do it as much as possible, even if they don't have.
Oh, she froze.
You froze, Lorraine. I'm going to wait for you to unfreeze, but while we're waiting,
Oh, we're gonna run out of time.
I see that James, has joined us, James Davis, who's a member of REC and a organizer of this, central organizer of this event. James, did you want to add anything?
No, I'm just getting ready for the next segment, Mike.
Okay. All right. So I just wanted to say, are we all frozen, by the way? Every one of us?
No, we're
Okay.
not here.
I'm not. All right. So I wanted to conclude with this because we don't have much time. And for the PSC, we have 3 central priorities: no layoffs, safe return to physical classrooms and to the university, and third is the question of class size. Those are our 3 priorities as articulated. And this has been, I think, a really rich discussion around differences across the university, differences class, the role of leadership at the university, the role of the union, and also a way forward. So I want to thank every one of the panelists, Blanca as a co-host, and, onward. We'll find a way together. So thank you all.